2 weeks ago, I tested my racing lawnmower for the very first time under race condition. In the first race, I wasn't allowed to drive, but in the second race, I was, and I broke the steering rack. So I ordered a new one. But then I realized I need to upgrade this with this beast. This is a steering rack from a car. I will show you how I fit it. But before that, let me just show you how I broke it. As I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, this was more like a demo event for a local TV show. We partook and showed what lawnmower racing is really about. But it gave me the chance to really try this one on a track. There was one corner in particular where I basically was going in with too much speed multiple times. One side kept lifting and my wheel debeated. That led to this part here, basically lifting, the gears not touching properly, and I would have a ton of slack. I had that issue twice and I don't want to have it again. And I'm gonna change my setup from a chain steering to something like this, where I have a direct connection. I got the hood off and now I can really show you what's up. So this gear is typically held with a chain, and that chain is connected to my steering wheel, and that's my type of chain steering. But first of all, you can see that I can move it up and down, and it has a ton of wiggle in every direction. Just to show you why I need a new wheel, this is how it should look like. Take a notice how wide this is. Check it out over here. This space is because this got mushed together and my ball bearing is actually pressed inside. I laid out and cut some parts. I have a bunch of things, of course, the steering rack. I bought some metal, which some of it I already cut. I have a little 90-degree gearbox. I hope this is strong enough. It seems okay for now, but let's see. And some other additional pieces to make it all work. Even bought some 12 and 14 millimeter drill bits. And already drilled 2 holes and cut this piece. This will go here, because these are the mounting locations. And my issue is that this shaft will be like this, right? Rotating around this axis. And if I would have 10 centimeter distance like this one would hit the rack and pinion, like it would hit this piece. This has to be 10 centimeters because of how I designed the rest of the knuckles. I tagged some stuff, and this is how it looks now. Now I need the bar which goes on the top. Originally, I was just gonna have the bar like this, but obviously that covers this input. I could just have it like this, and I guess that could work. This part needs to stay open because I will have the knuckle coming out here. And then I will put some beams around here, which are additional supports all the way through. Next up, I want to figure out how I attach this piece of metal to that piece of metal. And I would like to make it bolt on so I can remove it in the future. But before doing that, I need to figure out what my caster is. So if you don't know what caster is, it's basically this axis. So there's an axis here where the wheel knuckle rotates around of. And for that, I need to figure out the position of those. This is where my steering knuckles will be attached to. And I realized if I put one all the way to that side and the bottom side all the way over here, that gives me roughly 6%. What I'm aiming for is 12%, which means that this entire piece of metal needs to be rotated a little bit. So rotate it further that way by roughly 6%. And that affects how the attachment to the lawnmower should look like. And if you look here, this is the part I used to have, and it has a big angle over here. And it actually worked pretty well, so I will still stay with the 12%. And what this angle does is basically straighten out your wheels when you drive, so you don't have to forcefully always counter steer. And something else I nearly forgot is that the entire lawnmower is also leaning forward, so this angle will get affected by how your stance is. And since I would like it leaned forward, have more weight on the front so I can steer better, I also need to compensate for that. And if you look at the old setup, currently this is actually horizontal with the ground, and this has a giant angle, much more than 12%. But that is because the front, of course, is further down. So it would look more something like this, where this is a little bit more straight up. I have to keep that in mind, but since I have the old part, I can take some measurements and figure it out. And I aim for that I have in the end 12% caster. After quite some time, I cut some metal, and now I know how I want things to be. So I cut this on an angle, I will weld this here, and this will then attach to this. That should be fairly decent. And I think I will do some triangulation bracing down here. But first I will attach this and I can take the rest afterwards. So there are some mounting holes on the frame. And to know where they are, I will just use some spray paint. And then I can just spray it and figure out exactly where they are. Now that it cooled down, I could take it off and it's very clear to see where I have to cut now, or what, drill some holes. I got this positioned and clamped down. It's 10 centimeters off each side and 1.5 centimeters from the bottom. This distance is, so the front end is even lower. This is how far I got. The rack and pinion is roughly in. Everything is only tacked. And the steering knuckle will also fit, so that's great. There's one issue I have, and that is those are gonna be placed on these, which are then welded to this frame I built, and they should just screw on. Well, the ones I got are not a righty-tighty, but a lefty-tighty. So they don't fit on this bolt, so that's kind of annoying. I have to reorder those. After 4 more hours of cutting and welding, I got this far. The steering knuckle is on. I had to cut a little bit out because I measured the wrong length here and forgot that there's a bunch of things, but that allowed me to put a plate like this. So it should be extra strong and extra beefy. And now it actually fits. I already put roughly 2-3% camber on it. And the other side looks like this. And if I turn it around, you can see this is the rack and pinion. And I need some tie rods, which will probably be around here. That won't give me as much space to actually weld them on. So what I did is take the rubber cap off, and that gives me a bunch more space to actually work with, because this is basically the end stop for that. I will also take that one out to see what I got, make sure that everything is aligned in the middle, and then figure out where I place this one, so I actually have some adjustment for my toe. The next thing I did is basically cut this one. So I only have the bottom part. That threads on this part over here. In the end, I would like to have this nut all the way over here where I put the marks. Then I have a bit of adjustment both in and out. What I then did was use a glove to cover up the greasy part so I don't get any dust or debris in when I grind this down so I can weld it. I also made a flat spot so I have an easier time welding this part on. Next up, I will actually put those back on. Then cover them up with some kind of wet rag, and then I should be able to weld it. So this is my setup. I have 2 wet cloths, which I keep an eye on so they don't start burning or anything, but that will just protect the steering rack. Much better. Now I have a lot of clearance, not a lot, but a millimeter when I'm in this angle. Let's see if it fits. I did my camber the wrong way. I want negative, but it's actually leaning out the other way. But I will leave it for now. I just want to see how it looks with the wheels. I can always do those adjustments later. I don't know if the camera is picking it up, but it's wider than the rear, and it's also wider than the table. Nice. The steering is gonna be quite easy. Even though I don't have any leverage, I can move it. So that's pretty cool. It might be a tad too wide, but I can adjust that with those. I can get those further in, the same here, and then it should be fine. But I think what I will actually do is get a new plate for the table so it fits, and extend the rear by a little bit. Let me just measure it and see how wide the axles actually are. So let's start off with the rear to get a baseline. So the rear is 106 and the front 116. I actually don't know how wide my door is, so I'm also gonna measure that. The opening of my door is 114. My lawnmower is 116 wide. Something is not adding up, but I think I can easily change that. I can do some changes, and I think what I will do is put one of the spaces on the other side. That will give me 2 centimeters. Then I should be right on the money, but I will also adjust my camber, and then I can just move it 0.5 centimeter on each side in. That should give me another centimeter, and then I should have a 5 millimeter space on each side, so then it can't really be wider. Otherwise, I need to build it somewhere else. But with that, thank you so much for watching. Maybe consider subscribing or watch this video on how I actually built the chain steering. The concept worked and it was also working for a while. Otherwise, stay safe and stay healthy. Enjoy your project and see you in the next episode. Goodbye.